Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to hear a story about clean tech water today, an update on the most recent and significant announcement the company made to the ASX, and the CEO, Willem Friesendorp, will also give us an update on the company, what's happening there at the moment and what we can look forward to. I'm going to hand it over to Willem. We may have time for some questions at the end, so if you do have those, please put them in the chat section at the bottom of the screen. Over to you, Willem.
Thanks, Peter. So thanks everybody for tuning in today. As Peter mentioned, a short update focusing mostly on the latest news, but also running through some of what happened and what we're looking forward to. There is a detailed presentation on the ASX announcement, so you can download that. In here, I will discuss a selection of those slides. So we are Clean Tech Water. I think that's known to most people who are watching this. Our focus is to deliver water treatment and metal recovery solutions to accelerate the transition to a more circular economy. We have three businesses. The one on the left is the one that gets most attention. Most of our company is working in that area, which is our water technology solutions. Each of those solutions is based on a unique set of technologies. And that's the area that's right now generating most of the revenues and most of the news. But certainly that's not the only part we have. All on the right side, it's also something we've given more attention recently. Those are our graphene membranes, where after almost a decade of developments, we're now really going towards the final step towards market introduction. And then we also still have extensive, deep expertise in metal recovery. That's the middle section. And that's known, I think, to most people watching this and most of our shareholders because of the link with Sunrise. We're still providing support there for various technical areas of that project. But it's also an expertise we are aiming to apply again to other areas. So the goal here really is to use the expertise we have and then find assets such as tailings to apply it to, and thereby creating extra value because our technology can then recover certain metals at a lower cost than another technology can, or sometimes that no one else can, which then means we could take a marginal asset or an asset that's really a cost into something that can be very valuable. So it's something we work on in the background. It's obviously not something where we have already achieved such a project, otherwise we would have announced it, but it's certainly an important part of who we are. Overall highlights, some of them are known for the last year, for those who have been following us, but just to highlight a few out of those. The pneumatic achievement, I have a few slides on that later, where we achieved commercial scale manufacturing, which is a very essential and one of the last major milestones before market introduction. We handed over our second Oman project. We've signed a couple of contracts, 6 since the beginning of the previous year and 3 in this financial year, with a total contract value of around 10 million. And in there is the latest announcement we made of the $5 million contract we got awarded for groundwater treatment in the Northern Territories. Then we obviously continue to work towards implementation of our existing projects, somewhat affected by value chain bottlenecks or supply chain bottlenecks, I should say, but still making a steady progress there. We continue to support Sunrise. We're working on, as I mentioned, some of those metal recovery directions, doing test work for various customers with whom we're having discussions. And we're obviously actively pursuing various projects in the various sectors. So that has led to a substantial increase in our revenues. So as you might know, we've pretty much 5-6 years ago, we started to sign the first large-scale demonstration project for our technology solutions business. Then a few years ago, we really started to build the commercial group within our company, and that has resulted in the signing of these multiple projects that then have resulted in this increase in revenues. And we're aiming to continue this fast growth, so we're aiming for more than 75% growth annually for the coming years. So then on the first project, perhaps first a bit, not the first project, the recent project we signed in the Northern Territories. Some background perhaps. So here we're treating groundwater. Groundwater is a very important source of water supply around the world, including Australia, both for drinking water and irrigation. And it's second after surface water. So it's 20% roughly in Australia, which is still a very, very large amount. And it's essential, obviously, for those communities and for those economies. And it's quite challenging. So that's why we like it as a company, because our technologies are very geared towards dealing with challenging circumstances. And for groundwater that is high salinity, other complexity in the water, so that could be all kinds of pollutants, a large variability, remote locations, which also requires a lot of your technology to make sure it's robust and can be operated remotely. And then there's specific pollutants that are a concern. So 3 examples of that are uranium, nitrate, and fluoride. And in this case, so that's the next one. So this specific contract we got awarded is for the removal of uranium out of one of those groundwater sources. And this is part, as we mentioned in the announcement as well, this is part of a larger program for improvement of the water supply and water security in those areas. So we obviously hope this is going to be the first of a multiple project program. For this specific project, the design has now started, and we hope to soon move on to the next stage, which would be the starting of the ordering of the various pieces of equipment. The goal at the moment is still to have it delivered before the end of this calendar year. And our technology here is ion exchange. So that's one of our deep expertise, ion exchange. It is batch, meaning not our continuous ion exchange, but it's a batch system where we have designed it such, or are designing it such, that we optimize the brine production, so the secondary waste, which is always a big concern, because in these kind of areas you need to deal with that properly. And then secondly, obviously the robustness is a very important element of this project. Then another big deal, which is a few months ago, where we also made an announcement, but perhaps it's good to share this slide to give you a bit of extra background on our graphene oxide membranes, where on the left you see the benefits. That's obviously often the question. One of the big exciting parts of this development is that these membranes are effectively the same from the outside to any other of the nanofiltration membranes. So we can slot it into existing plants. We can, once we've proven ourselves, see very fast growth because of that, because customers will recognize it, agents will be used to dealing with this kind of membrane. But the qualities, so the characteristics of the membranes have a number of very substantial benefits. They're listed on the left. The first one, to just emphasize that one, is the lower energy requirements. For membranes, energy is usually the biggest cost, so the biggest operational cost. And to be able to reduce that with typically 50%, it always depends a bit on the application, is a very substantial reduction. And beyond that, there's a number of other benefits, including the third one, to emphasize that one as well, high resistance to fouling and oxidation. Fouling, as anybody who has worked with membranes probably knows, is one of the biggest headaches for wastewater treatment plants that are using membranes. So to have a membrane that is much more resistant to that, and then also much better able to be cleaned because of its high chemical stability, can create very, very large benefits for customers. So what did we do here? First of all, the fact that we're using graphene as the active filtration layer is a big change to what exists out there at the moment. So that's a huge benefit. And at the same time, we have solved the manufacturing problem. And that problem is basically that you don't only want to have a great membrane that works once very well, but you want to be able to produce it at a low cost. And we do that by printing or rolling these membranes in multiple layers on top of a support layer. And that's what we've proven a few months ago when we printed 1,000 meters, which means that we've taken these 2 steps at once. So we have a membrane that has these benefits I showed on the previous slides, and we're very, very far towards being now able to produce it at a mass scale. And right now we're looking to do pilots to do multiple pilots in our core target sectors around the world to then prove that this works at a larger scale, at a long term. And that's then really the final step towards signing actual contracts and actually starting to sell these membranes. Then final, this is not something new. This is a project that has been going on. It's still a very important project, so I thought I'd bring it up here again. This is the Ordos Project in China that we signed a little over a year ago. That's close to handover, so we already produced clean water a while ago, and since also with the COVID lockdowns, it's been a bit hard to get it over the line, but we're close. And this is another good example of groundwater and groundwater pollution, and a good example where our technologies have a very good fit. In this case, it's the removal of nitrate in an area where this water won't be used for drinking, but needs to be disposed of in a sensitive area, meaning nitrate needs to be removed fully, again with minimal brine production, which this plant will do. So this then is the sort of the step back of the company development for the last 5 years. So you see this acceleration in growth driven by signing up of more and more projects. And this has followed our building up of our commercial team and, of course, the finalization of these large-scale demonstration plants. Because that's always a very essential bit of achieving this acceleration in growth. Very strong pipeline. I think I've shown this in one of the previous presentations as well. So what you see here is huge potential. And as I always like to emphasize, these are real projects with customers where we checked the water quality, where there's interest and a good fit with our technology. It is not to say, or I'm not going to make any prediction or otherwise forecast on the percentage of these projects that will be converted. Some of these projects are in regions that are far away or with customers that we never worked with. So conversion is the area where we're mostly focused on for these projects, but it clearly shows the enormous potential we're having with our technology portfolio. And the middle graph is always good to look at. You see there the mix of technologies we're having, and you see a very good mix, which confirms that the portfolio approach we have to this market is effective and is also being appreciated by customers that are clearly in various situations interested in many of our technologies. So we're not dependent on one of them in any specific situation. And this then, so we have this very strong pipeline, and then another thing that gives us a lot of confidence about our ability to deliver on growth are 4 trends that we see and that we expect as part of our maturation as a company. So one is, with every new demonstration plant, with every new plant in a new region, we facilitate better conversion going forward, right? So this enormous potential of a pipeline, that pipeline gets faster and more effective conversion the moment you have local projects. So 2 important examples, as mentioned here, are our first project for Hyrox in the Middle East, in the oil and gas sector, which is a very important and potentially large sector, and the project I just showed in China for Bionex, where both China is obviously an important market for us, but also Bionex is an important technology that we expect to have much demand beyond China as well. So then we have access to larger scale projects as well. So that's an important driver of growth. Time will be reduced. We are continuously standardizing our designs, which means you can get faster conversion and faster delivery. And then we have the repeat business that perhaps is a topic to focus on in one of the follow-up webinars. That's growing automatically. After we deliver projects, we tend to have an ongoing consumables business, but especially also with BioCleanse and over time, of course, our graphene membranes, which are by their nature consumables, we would also expect the consumable business to grow. That then brings me to the final slide. It's looking forward for the next period. There's a number of things happening. One is, of course, the continued delivery on the projects we've sold, so the contracts we've signed. Then, of course, on the back of that, in expansion and continuation of our commercial pipeline, so signing new contracts, We're looking at new markets as well. Our technology is relatively advanced, so that fits very well with the more advanced markets, including Europe and the US, for example. And especially in Europe, we're looking at expansion of our activities, including more representation in both Africa and Europe that then could meet those requests. We work on the metal recovery area, so we're hoping to make progress there. Graphene membranes, as I mentioned, two things there for the next 12 months. It's really to get these pilots out there, and also to then on the back of those pilots sign the first contracts for sales. And then standardization, which I mentioned, we obviously continue to support Sunrise Energy using our proprietary knowledge in metal processing, also to support Sunrise. We're looking again at the boot model. Some of you might remember we used to have a big project where we won a boot contract, which was then later converted into an EPC contract. But that's still a potential area where we see demand. So we see some customers that are really interested in that. So we're looking at offering that also in the upcoming year, which would also be then a driver for ongoing revenue. And then as a final point, we continue obviously to actively pursue commercial projects across the sectors that we focus on.
Thanks, Willem. A good summary there of what is an extensive water treatment solution portfolio. A couple of questions here which are coming through and relevant, I think, to the Australian market, particularly the scale of the mine tailings opportunity in this country alone would be significant. How busy is that sector for your competitors, and what sort of scale is there for you? Is that an industry where you can sort of plug and play a simple solution over and over again?
I think there's a number of questions in that question. So first of all, there's a massive amount of opportunities there. There's tailings everywhere, and there's a lot of places where you also have waste streams and other places where a lot of valuable metals are going to waste. And especially in the current environment of shortages of metal, high metal prices, a battery market that's obviously increasing and only going to increase its growth, the opportunities are everywhere. The way we look at this market is really that we are aiming for an opportunity that's bigger with a certain upside in the metal recovery. So that could be through an equity stake, that could be through some license agreement linked to the metal recovery. So we are really more aiming for one or two or maybe a couple of projects that have that upside. So where we are the technology provider, but as a technology provider, we're looking to get upside through the success that we provide to the customer, rather than that we're looking to say, okay, we're going to do equipment project sales in those areas, because every single project is still very bespoke. So unlike our water treatment, where we can standardize and expand over time quicker and quicker, because you get more and more standardized solutions. In metal recovery, you would probably, for most of these situations, in every single situation, look at a customized flow sheet, which can be massively valuable if you get the metals out, but means it's more suitable for us to be selective there than to say, let's just optimize or maximize the amount of contracts we sign here.
So not just a matter of cleaning up the tailings dams and returning at the end of a mining project's life a clean lake or water reservoir back to the environment, but actually extracting the leftover metals in the tailings dam as well. It gives that added benefit.
That's correct. So I answered your question from this metal recovery or tailings management direction, which we're aiming for. It's the area we've talked least about. So we're working in the background. We're working at various pilots around the world to get a project over the line there, but it's still early days there. There is indeed also a water element to it, where it's not so much about the metal recovery, and there we are pursuing that as part of our water solutions business. That could be simply just an individual growth business, and there are many projects in the pipeline that we're looking to convert, and there we can standardize much more. But I've answered your question from the perspective of my comment earlier on the metal recovery area that we're looking to develop as well.
Yes. Thanks, Willem. Brine projects. What is their scale around the world, and as targets for a company like CleanTeQ? Do you have a number of those in your pipeline that you're currently targeting?
So I'm not sure what's meant with brine projects.
Well, the treatment of the issues in large brine areas that you've been looking at too, where you're treating that sort of salt affected water.
Yeah, so I would say there most of our solutions and most of the biggest challenges in water are around brine management. So it's either to minimize brine or it's to clean up brine. And almost any wastewater treatment in the world has secondary waste, and that secondary waste typically comes in the form of high saline brines. So in a way, 9 out of our 10 projects are in that area. So then I answer this question from that perspective, and then the question is, okay, how big are your typical projects? So currently our typical project is a couple of $1 million. And that's also where most volume is, but we are certainly also looking at some much larger projects. And as I mentioned earlier about these growth accelerators, those larger projects become more and more available for us to bid for and to win. So there are projects out there that are 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 million, where we would still really see our technology as the majority of that solution. And so there's plenty of large projects that we think are very attractive, but right now are hard for us to bid for, given that we're still in an early stage of our growth.
That was one of the other questions I had, the competitive landscape for projects above 10 million, which you're leading towards. Is it tightly contended with other peers? And does your portfolio of different solutions give you an advantage? So
a strong yes to both. These projects can be very competitive, which means that in order to win them, you really need to bring something special. And we bring such a special thing. And in fact, it's sort of a cause and effect. We won't bid for projects, especially that size, where we wouldn't bring something special, unless there is a certain customer we really want to work for, or if it's an entry in a new region. So both yes, but it is a challenge, especially currently, right? So currently, a lot of these large projects have very tight bidding requirements. So we would be working with other partners these days when we would be bidding for some of those projects, and we are. But over time, of course, as we start delivering larger and larger projects, we can also do those projects on a standalone basis. And then they can be very attractive if we use our solutions and provide the benefits to the customers and to ourselves.
And Will, finally, pneumatic, how significant is it to you and the company as a milestone of transition, or not transition, but of a launching for the company to have that commercial launch of pneumatic underway?
Yeah, very substantial, very significant, which is why it's again in this presentation as well. It is very substantial. Also, following the membrane market, you do see, and that includes in graphene membranes, it's been quite a lot of talk about it. There's been some tests, there's been a lot of promise. And then I think a lot of these things are very hard to get over the line, but it's substantial, especially because we did two things at once almost. So we're now having these very good test results with the membranes, and we had it by running it on a fast producing commercial scale line. And I think these two things, I cannot emphasize that enough, are very substantial steps towards that final milestone, which is where we're now, which is proving it in the field, proving it with real customers for months at a time with actual wastewater, and then showing that these characteristics that we're seeing right now, if we're testing our membrane, are indeed also shown to the customer and to the market in the field.
Okay, that exhausts our questions today. Willem, thank you. I look at the Gantt chart of the pipeline of work here and how it's increasing substantially now into 22 and 23. We look forward to ongoing news of your success coming forward soon. So I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and thanks to our audience. And we look forward to hearing positive news from CleanTeQ Water very soon.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everybody.